Welcome to week 4 of Explore the Bible. We're continuing in the book of Mark. Great passage today, one that's probably very familiar to many of you. So I really want to encourage you. We're in chapter 6. Read all of chapter 6. You know, we're kind of flying through the Gospel of Mark. Read chapter 4 and 5 before you get to 6, since we were in chapter 3 last week. But really spend some time in this passage. Read it fresh. Ask some questions. We'll talk about some of those questions that we ought to ask as we go through it that I think will help bring this passage alive again and not just be, well, we know kind of what the story is. Don't assume that you know everything about the story. Read the passage. All right, before we look at Mark 6, be sure and like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, share the video with others. Always appreciate it if you do that. And if you want to support what we're doing, go to give.exposedtochrist.com. The link will be in the description, so you can do that. Let's look at Mark chapter 6. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. But many saw them leaving and recognized them, and they ran out on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. So Jesus is telling his disciples, in essence, you got to get a break, right? You need to rest. He's hearing about all the things that the apostles are telling him, you know, what they had done. So you got to read chapter 6, the first 29 verses of it, to figure out where we are in the story and what's happened, right, as Jesus has sent them out and they've come back. And now he tells them it's time to rest. So this is a debrief time for them. You know, we're going to have this. And so all these people are coming. They didn't have time to eat. They didn't have any quiet time when he could just talk to them. So they go away in the boat to this remote place. They try to find another place. But when they get there, everybody else has already seen where they're going, and they've all shown up from the towns around there. So the popularity, the acclaim of Jesus is definitely growing as we get to this point in time in his ministry, and it makes it harder and harder for him to have time to disciple the disciples. And that is a big part of what Jesus is doing. And I think sometimes we may miss that he is not just doing miracles. He's not just doing this broad teaching, but he is discipling these 12 because Jesus knows he will not be here forever, and that they will be responsible for taking this message, that they will be the leaders of the church, and so that it's important that they be discipled. And so he's really wanting to find ways to pour into them. Okay, when he went ashore, so they get up to the other place where they were trying to get alone, right? He saw a large crowd and had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And then he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples approached him and said, "This place is deserted. It is already late. Send them away so they can go into the surrounding countryside and villages to buy themselves something to eat." So they get to shore, and they've got their time in the boat. But they get to shore, and here's this large crowd, and this is, Jesus had compassion. I've told y'all, and I think in these videos you've seen before, we talk about this word, splagnizomai, that his stomach turned over, that he hurt for these people. He had compassion on them. And so he began to teach because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He saw them coming, and they didn't see themselves this way. But Jesus saw them this way. Many of them, I'm sure, thought, I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I know what my life is. They were intrigued. They came to visit, but some of them knew they weren't. Jesus knew it. He knew they were just wandering aimlessly. They didn't know what to do, where to go, how to live. They didn't see hope. They didn't see a way through. They were like sheep without a shepherd. They had no one to watch over them. They had no one that was giving them guidance. They just didn't know. Listen, I think this is a good way for us to think about how we look at the world today and consider that the enemies of Christianity, or the people who are apathetic about Christianity, or the people just that don't ever think about it at all, are sheep without a shepherd. And they may not recognize this. They may not describe themselves this way, but that is the case. And maybe that changes how we look at them. Jesus had compassion on them because he saw them as they were, sheep without a shepherd. And so he began to teach them many things. And then when it gets late, the disciples come up and say, look, the place is deserted. It's late. They need to get some food. They've got to go buy some food. They're out here. What are they going to do? There's no McDonald's nearby. There's no Chick-fil-A yet. What are we going to do? Somebody's got to help these people. Right? They need to just send them away. Maybe it was that we wanted to rest. We wanted some time away from these people. We'd just been with them, and Jesus had this energy that he would just pour himself out over and over and over again. Paul talks about it in Ephesians, about being poured out like water poured out, washing them clean. Jesus just poured himself out over and over and over again. And I'm sure the disciples wondered, how does he do this? How does he have the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical strength to do this over and over and over again? But Jesus did, and they're like, just send them away. Let's send them away. Let's get some time away. And then Jesus says to them, because he is discipling them too. And often I think probably they've heard a lot of the things that he was teaching. They had heard those things before. And maybe they started to tune them out a little bit. But Jesus was discipling them. So he says, you give them something to eat. Well, they said to him, should we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? I mean, we're supposed to go buy a whole bunch of bread. Where are you going to buy that bread? We can't buy this bread. What do you mean you give them something to eat? And he asked them, well, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. So what do you have? We got 5 loaves and 2 fish. There are all these people here, hundreds, thousands of people here. What in the world are we supposed to do? 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's all we've got. And Jesus says, you give them something to eat. And this is all we've got. You give of yourself. You pour yourself out for them. You sacrifice for them. You give to them. And this is all we've got. Then he instructed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Now this tells you right off the bat, there were a lot of people there when you can make groups of hundreds and 50s, right? And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke the loaves. And then he kept giving them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. And everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up 12 baskets full of pieces of bread and fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were 5,000 men, which maybe means there were 15,000 people there. Some debate about, did they just count the men, or was this a count of whole? And a lot of people would say he's counting the men, but there were actually, the women and the children there too. They were in groups of hundreds and 50s. There were a lot of people there for 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Okay. So Jesus takes them and he blesses them and he breaks them. And he kept giving. I want you to pick up on this. Jesus is the one giving. So he didn't just say, okay, here they are. Y'all go and start passing them down. Jesus was breaking and giving to the disciples, and then they're taking and they're distributing, right? He divided the 2 fish. He gives them to the disciples, and they pass them out among the people. And when they're done, everyone ate and was satisfied. Everybody had everything that they wanted to have. They were satisfied, and they picked up 12 baskets full of pieces. Now, this just kind of hit me going through this time. When Jesus is the one doing the distribution, right? So he's breaking pieces off and putting it into the basket, giving it to the disciples. The disciples go and start passing it out. How many disciples are there? Well, there are 12. So how many baskets do they have? They have 12 baskets, right? That's what they start with. And when they're done, they bring back, and all their baskets are still full. The 12 baskets. It's hard to picture how this happens, right? It's hard to imagine, was there a cloth over the basket to kind of keep the flies away or whatever, and then you would reach your hand in and take what you wanted, and then they would pass it to the next person, and they would reach their hand in, and everybody took what they wanted, and it just never got, it's not just that it never emptied, but it actually got fuller. As they went along, there was more and more and more in every basket, because 5 loaves and 2 fishes weren't going to fill up one basket, much less 12. So when he divides them and sends them out, are they multiplying in his hands as he divides them? Maybe, probably so. But then they're multiplying in the baskets as they're distributing it. That Jesus supplied all that they need and more for all of the people. I mean, this is miraculous, right? And I want us to think about what this said to the disciples, because remember, he's discipling the disciples too. And so he told them, you give them something to eat, right? You feed them, and they brought all they had, and when they're done, every one of them brings back a basket full. And each one of them must have been amazed that they were doing this, not knowing that all the other disciples were also doing this, and they were all getting full baskets as well. And they come back, and, you know, this whole understanding of who Jesus is part of the deal. But then it's understanding what it means to follow him, and understanding who he is in your life and in the world, and what he can do and will do and what power he has. All of this is a part of our growing in our walk with him, to the point where we believe that we just give him what we have, and he takes care of the rest, right? He deals with it in a way that multiplies it, grows it, satisfies, and gives us leftovers. And we revel even in the leftover. How wonderful it is. This growth for them is amazing to me, and I hope it is to you as well. Hey, I hope this has helped. God bless you. Thank you for teaching. Thank you for taking what you've got and giving it to the Lord, and let him multiply it. God bless you for that. Subscribe, comment, share, like the videos. We will see you next week.